Hi guys, welcome to my office. I'm looking at you from like the opposite side that I usually do in my videos, but I was just sitting at my desk looking at my lesson planner from last year, and I like to do this before the new year starts and just kind of go through all of the lessons that I taught last year and just kind of evaluate and take stock of what did I like, what went well, were there some lessons that were duds that like I could do them a better way, or were there things that took too long. Sometimes I look through and I'm like, oh my gosh, we spent that many weeks on that project, like I need to make that go faster, or some things I just need to cut out entirely. So as I was going to do it, I just thought maybe you would want to look through my lesson planner with me as well. So last year I taught 6th grade English and then 6th grade Read 180 reading intervention. And so all of my lessons for the entire year for both those classes are in here. So if that's something that you teach or you're going to be teaching, this is just an example of how one teacher in the world did it. I think this might end up being a pretty long video, so maybe grab some coffee or a snack or something as you watch. I've got my iced Americano from Starbucks. This is what I always get, my iced Americano with vanilla. So I'll just show you my lesson planner here. So this is my lesson planner for last year. I got this from Purple Trail Planner. I love it. I got to like customize what the little books say. I like the little glasses, and it has my name and my school on it. I did like an unboxing review of this planner last summer when I first got it, but it was like empty. My favorite thing is that on the back it says too cool for middle school. I want to get another one of these again this year. I got, what was it, like the Happy Planner, like 365. But I'm not sure which one I'm going to use, so I might get another one of these. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I like that it's really sturdy. It lasted me the whole year. I didn't really bring it back and forth because it is kind of heavy, so I just left it at my desk and I just used it there. It's got like some calendar pages. I didn't really fill out the beginning stuff. We did start in August. Let me find none of these. Nope. Okay, here we go. So I think this was the first week of school, and they've got these headers at the top that I really like. So I gave myself 3 sections for my English classes and then just 1 for Read 180, because at the beginning I only varied the lessons a little bit. And then I had a section for what to do on my prep period, any meetings that we had, because I usually had quite a few meetings, and then just any errands that I had to run after school. So I liked that there was so much space, and this just goes Monday through Friday. It doesn't even have weekend boxes. This is just simply for teaching. So it's kind of nice just to really fill it up with all of your lesson stuff. So it looks like at the beginning of the year, I just had them set up their Google Classrooms. They got their passwords for commonlit.org, and they read this story called Masks. And then we also set up their Newsella accounts, and we read this Pokemon text set. Pokemon Go was like really big last year. So I always do a day like that where we just go to all the websites that we use pretty often and like save their passwords so we can get in quickly in the future. We had like some assemblies, a fire drill right at the beginning. So this is, you know, kind of like a typical first week of school type of a thing. And then on these days, I guess I didn't do anything different for Read 180, but we did start logging in and I think like taking their SRI tests and just getting those types of things worked out. I had a lot of meetings to go to at the beginning of the year. I coached sports. I was a new teacher at the school, so we had like new teacher meetings and then like department meetings, grade level meetings, another coaches meeting. So there was just a lot to do right at the beginning there. And then the next week, I use vocabulary a lot. I love vocabulary. We started looking at the 5 elements of a story. We read some articles, it looks like, on Newsella and commonlit.org. I remember that we read this story called A Dead Body by Chekhov, and one of my students' parents was so impressed that we were reading Russian literature, and they actually did a really good job with that. And in Read 180, we did really similar activities. This was also the class where like the web kids would come in and do activities with them, so they were usually like a little bit off of the schedule as everybody else. I started volleyball this week. These little like post-it notes are from Erin Condren, and like whenever I just totally changed my mind about something, I would just stick a little post-it over it. There are pages at the end of the month to take notes on, so I did like staff meeting notes there. And then for September, I just kind of had goals for like YouTube. I ended up changing that later and using my calendar a little bit more later too, but I didn't use it that much at the beginning. So then the next week, I was working on them with quoting. That's kind of a hard thing for middle schoolers to understand sometimes, like citing sources and embedding quotes into their writing. We did a lesson called Said is Dead, and just using words besides said, like anything but said. This was right before 9/11, and so actually I have a really good like unit on 9/11. It includes a lot of reading and writing. I can't remember if I ever made a YouTube video about it. If I did, I'll try and link it below. I think maybe I just thought about making a video and I didn't actually do it. For Read 180, it looks like the only differences were that we started our rotations and started doing some quizzes. I remember we read this story, The Scholarship Jacket, out of commonlit.org, and I did not use the textbook at all last year, so that's why I'm using so many online resources. This year we're getting a new curriculum, like just all new curriculum for English, and so I didn't want to learn a new textbook last year and then learn a whole new set of curriculum this year. So I just kind of did whatever I wanted last year, and there are so many resources online that it wasn't really that bad just to like come up with it all from scratch. So we did The Gift of the Magi. I love that story. Started looking at character, doing plot quizzes. I did a lot of book response essays on Fridays last year. I need to reinstate that this year. I liked doing it and then I kind of got away from it. Again, for Read 180, we were fairly similar at the beginning, and then I had a lot of like volleyball stuff going on at the end of the day. This week we started a Wolf unit. This is from Odell Education. You can access their curriculum online, I think for free. And I actually really like this unit. I was forced to do it in my last district, but actually I didn't mind it. I think it was pretty good. There are a few texts in the text set that are terrible, but actually that's really fun to read the really bad ones and just kind of make fun of them and talk about why the writing is so bad. We also started community circles this day, because I think the week before, yeah, I had gone to a restorative practices training, and so we started community circles in September, and we did them once a week for the rest of the year, basically. And again, it looks like my Read 180 class was pretty similar. It does start to divert a little bit as I go through the year. We did some peer editing and revising. I like calling this stage in the writing process Edit for Sophistication, and I use Newsela because the articles on their site are leveled, and so there are like maybe 6 or 7 different reading levels, and so I had my students like read one article at a low reading level and then the same article at a higher reading level and take note of what made it more sophisticated, and then they tried to do that same thing with their writing. So I really liked that. In the Wolves unit we read like White Fang. This text set is pretty good, all about wolves. Now this is when I finally realized that we had different books for Read 180 that were in the library, and nobody ever told me that. So we started with the books and read a story about Louisa, and here's where I started like actually learning what Read 180 was and like how to run that program, because nobody ever told me, so that was fun. More volleyball stuff here. Oh, I went to this really great English conference in San Diego, and so I took a bunch of notes right here. I'll try to link the people who ran the conference. I forget, but I think I wrote them down here. So I kept my notes from there. Let's see, so October, this is where I started writing down my goals for the month, and this was really helpful. So I knew I wanted to do like finish the Wolf unit, do a descriptive language unit, start on pyramids. I was collaborating with the 6th grade history teachers, and then also do some Poe stuff because Halloween was in this month. Sorry, the shadows are like so bad on this. My husband wants to go see Dunkirk after this, so he's like, hurry up and do the video. But he thought this video was a really good idea. He doesn't usually say that about many of my videos, but he was like, ooh, that's really helpful. You should totally do that. So anyway, let's see. So now we're into October. We're still on this Wolves unit. Yeah, it looks like all the way through here. We started writing an essay along with it and looking at White Fang. I did incorporate some of that unit into my Read 180 class, but just a little bit less of it because we would usually go a little bit slower. Oh, this was a day when the students didn't have school. We just had a staff development day, and we heard Horacio Sanchez speak, and he was great. I definitely suggest him if you ever get a chance to see him. He is wonderful. He speaks about closing the achievement gap, and he's just incredible. Okay, this next week, see, we are still on this Wolves thing. Like, this is probably something I need to go through a little bit quicker next year. I don't remember what this meant, duh comments. Maybe just looking through your paper to find things that like you didn't really need to explain, I don't know. And here we started going into, legends and myths about wolves. That was such a fun unit, I remember. And in Read 180, we were looking at the immigration unit. It's kind of funny because Read 180 tends to be for like students who are learning English and maybe spoke another language and maybe are from another place. And so there was like this whole story about an immigrant coming to the United States, and then it like asked all these questions about the kids' personal life, like to try and get into their backgrounds, get them to connect to the curriculum. And I remember they were just like, whatever, it's not that hard to assimilate, like it's not that big of a deal. A lot of my students are from China, and most of the students in the whole school population are as well, so they were like, it's not that hard. I don't know why they're making such a big deal out of this. Oh yeah, I went to an Amy Grant concert with my friend that night. That was really fun. I love Amy Grant. I used Newsela to do like current event things, and so we were looking at the Electoral College. That was back in October. And then I started getting into Hammurabi's Code because I was collaborating with the 6th grade history teachers. So that was kind of fun. And then we also started getting into an Egyptian pyramid lesson, and this one is from Reading Like a Historian. It's on the Stanford Sheg website, and I loved this unit. Let's see, were we doing something similar for Read 180? Kind of. Okay, these documents, that means that we were doing the Hammurabi's Code lesson, I think. So we probably just went a little bit slower. And we just had like a lot of little things going on after school. I'm glad I have those columns just to keep track of things that I need to take care of later. So here is more on the pyramid lesson. The essential question is, did slaves build the pyramids in Egypt? And there is really not one correct answer. Historians do not even agree on this. So that was actually really fun to have them think really critically. We also made cartouches to go along with it. And we read Annabel Lee, which is a poem by Poe. This was right before Halloween, and they loved this poem. It was so fun to do, and I dressed up as Miranda Sings for Halloween, which I always do. Oh, you know what? I think this day we just like watched some of her videos so that they would know who I was when it was Halloween, because I was like, that'd be really embarrassing if I show up with lipstick all over my face and they don't know who I am. But they did. In our Read 180 class, there's a whole unit like based around the fall of the House of Usher. So we did that unit right before Halloween, and they loved it. I guess we also watched, the whole 6th grade class went and watched The Great Pumpkin, the Charlie Brown one. Okay, this day was Halloween, and on Netflix there's this like series, I guess, called Extraordinary Tales, and they have a version of the fall of the House of Usher, and it was awesome. So we watched it that day, and then we continued to study the story and compare the video version to the written version, which is actually one of the Common Core standards. So that was kind of a cool thing to do. Looks like we were still working on those cartouches, the sarcophagi, and kind of doing Fall of the House of Usher stuff. So sometimes, like, you know, projects overlap a little bit, especially if they are like seasonal. Looks like we were doing the same thing for Read 180, and gosh, look how many times web activities like put us behind. Ugh, I love web, but it really, I remember it was kind of like invasive. So for November, I wanted them to read this story called Fish Cheeks, which is in a lot of like 6th grade textbooks, and work on personification. We did a Steve Jobs unit, and then start Bud Not Buddy. And then I had to keep in mind that it was also Thanksgiving break, and so I wrote those things down. Now at this point, I started to realize that I would just do 2 columns for English and 2 columns for Read 180, because they really did end up becoming like separate classes, and so I just needed enough space to write down everything for both of them. So for my English classes, we were working on personification and current events. We started the Fish Cheeks story, and we were still doing like the Pharaoh stuff. So yeah, we did have to just kind of like combine things quite often. And then in Read 180, we did a lot of station work and small group work. So the class just turned out to be very different. We learned a little bit about Veterans Day, I believe. And this was the end of volleyball season. I ordered them pizzas. We had a lot of staff meetings and like sports meetings and stuff, so it was always a little bit crazy. So then for my English class, we started another Odell education unit that focused on Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford, and they actually really enjoyed this. It doesn't look like we spent a whole lot of time on it. Oh, we did. Okay, so it ended up being kind of in collaboration with this Engage New York unit that combined like his words of wisdom with Bud Not Buddy. This is a novel where he also has like a lot of words of wisdom. So we kind of paired these two things together. So that was pretty fun. Oh yeah, I remember that we outlined the speech and it had to be like really pretty. Like, have you ever looked up just like on Pinterest or just online like beautiful handwriting when people take notes? We tried to just like make our outlines look really nice and it was kind of fun. So you can see in my Read 180 class we had like very structured stations, like how long they were. We would go to the library. I didn't really take my other classes to the library, but I took them every week. And we were continuing to write like scary stories after reading some scary stories. And I had a lot of prep to do, it looked like. Oh, and then this was Thanksgiving break. That was wonderful. And then we came back and I shared about December with my students, and I've got a lot of videos about that, so you can check back on my channel if you want to know more about it. They got really into it this year. We were still reading Bud Not Buddy and talking about like word choice and doing this in conjunction with Steve Jobs. And I continued to use the Read 180 curriculum and separate out into stations and small groups. We also did one-on-one meetings on Fridays, and I would share like their data with them and their growth, and that was fun to do and something I had never really done before because I teach middle school. That's kind of more of a elementary thing, but it's really important. I really enjoyed doing that. Okay, in December I needed to finish up Bud Not Buddy, do the Words to Live By unit, and then we were also going to write our own 1-minute speeches that were like our own words to live by. And then Christmas break was coming up, so I had to keep that in mind. Buddy lives in Flint, Michigan, for part of the story at least, in Bud Not Buddy. So we also did like some current event stuff using Newsella and followed the water crisis in Flint. And it was so depressing, and it has still not been resolved, but that was one thing that I was definitely glad we did in that unit. We also continued to do restorative circles. I was just writing those down here and looking at character traits in Bud Not Buddy. Oh, this day I was out. I remember I got really sick. This was the only day of the year that I got sick, and I don't think I wrote everything down. I just left some sub plans. So that always kind of throws you off for the rest of the week, you know? I also found this amazing speech by Obama that had words to live by, so we just kind of incorporated that into our unit. Oh, and in Bud Not Buddy, there are jazz musicians and they all have a nickname, so we all came up with our own jazz names and called each other that for like the next week or so. That was really fun. I will definitely keep that from last year. And again, in my Read 180 class, like I just kind of wrote down page numbers, so it's not really jogging my memory. I can't remember exactly what we were doing, but it was a little bit more like regimented, I guess. Like we were going through a textbook rather than this class that was just like, whatever I feel like doing, that's what we're doing. Oh, this was the day that Mariah Carey's collaboration with MAC makeup came out, and so on my prep period I went to the mall and bought some makeup. That was fun. This was the last week before Christmas break, and so I did write myself a note that like all late work was due. Like I wouldn't have much time after that to input any more late work, so I always have to have a deadline for that a little bit before the end of the year. This was like their final. They were giving speeches to the class and I was grading them on those. And then on the last day before Christmas break, which was the 23rd, isn't that crazy that we went to the 23rd? We had an assembly. It was a half day. I showed the Chronicles of Narnia for the time that we did have in class, and I remember they really liked this movie. I appreciated that they didn't scoff at it. They were very nice about it. I have very nice students. They are really respectful and sweet. This was Christmas break. That was a fun week. Oh, and here I just wrote down like ideas for Bud Not Buddy for next year, just so I wouldn't forget. Like we didn't keep a running list of his little rules for life as we read through it, but I think that would have been a good thing to do. And also maybe to do a drawing of everything that's in Bud's suitcase. And some of these things we did do. Oh, we listened to a lot of Gregory Porter that unit because Gregory Porter is my favorite and he's a jazz musician and I wanted them to actually hear jazz music, so that was really fun. In January we did a civil rights unit, which I loved. We also did a fake news unit, which ended up being a lot of fun, and this was another collaboration with the history teachers to do Confucianism and Taoism. And I just had to keep in mind that it was Martin Luther King Day and Chinese New Year, which is a big deal at my school. Oh, at my school I think 5 weeks per semester you have to do traffic duty, and it sucks. We have crazy drivers at our school. Like, the parents just go nuts when they're dropping off their kids and they just speed off and are really unsafe. So teachers have to stand out there and like give them dirty looks. I hate doing traffic duty, but I just sign up for all of mine like the first 5 weeks of the semester so that I don't have to think about it anymore. Oh, and I got to go see Gregory Porter. That was so fun. That was like our first date after the baby. Okay, so this is when we came back from Christmas break, and we definitely needed to review procedures. We did this little like wintergram lesson. I remember this was from Fancy Free in 4th on Teachers Pay Teachers. And then we started a civil rights unit that I got from Hubbard's Cupboard on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I absolutely loved it. Everything about it was so wonderful. We read about like the bus boycott, the young people of the civil rights movement. We did this thing called a shrinking summary. It was so good. And for the Read 180 class, we did really similar activities. Sometimes they just took us a little bit longer, but we also read about the young people of the civil rights movement. It was just so inspiring. Oh, I loved it. Okay, so continuing in the civil rights unit, we read about like Greensboro College, Birmingham in 1963, the March on Washington. This was just so amazing, so incredible. I absolutely loved it. And I remember that this day was like inauguration day, and so my students had politics on their mind, and they kind of had like resistance on their mind, and so they were really into this lesson about peaceful protesting. And then we did write an essay about the civil rights movement, and that, you know, took quite a few days. It takes quite a long time. Oh, you know what they loved? I don't know why they even liked this so much, but we would do 15-minute productivity bursts where nobody was allowed to talk for 15 minutes. You would just write as much as you could, and then after 15 minutes we would take like a 3-minute break and listen to a song or watch a quick YouTube video or something like that, and then go back into another 15-minute productivity burst. And they were so into it. They would ask all the time, can we do a 15-minute productivity burst? I was like, sure, why not? I just thought it was like a good, you know, like study skill, and they actually really liked it. So then we got into this fake news unit, and we used a Newsella text set as well as something from the Stanford Sheg website, reading like a historian, and we kind of mixed those together. And then there were different groups that had to make posters about their particular topic within fake news. So that was actually really cool. It looks like, okay, now I moved my prep period column here and then put my Read 180 stations together, or my Read 180 sections together. Looks like we started a journal. Oh, and a lot of my students like are from China, and so they taught the lesson this day about Chinese New Year, because I really don't know much about it. And I wasn't gonna, you know, try and stand up there and teach them about Chinese New Year, so they taught me, and it was really cool. This was kind of fun. Let's see, then we started this Confucianism and Taoism unit from Stanford Sheg. Ugh, sorry, there's sirens in the background. And during this week, I was out for 4 days doing a Leader in Me training, and so I actually had the sub pretty much do this whole unit with them, but it has such good directions that he was able to handle it. I had the same sub for all 4 days, so that was nice, and he was able to take them through the whole unit, and then it was just done when I came back. That was awesome. And for my Read 180 kids, I posted games to Google Classroom each day and let them start with a game, like grammar games, and then they were also working on Read 180 stuff, so that was kind of fun. Going into February, I knew I wanted to do biography projects with them, and I had a few things going on. President's Day, Leader in Me, I had an observation. I went to a TPT conference, like a little meetup thing that month. That was fun. Oh, we did this thing called rainbow editing, which I'll have to make a video about, just where you can do this kind of editing on like a Chromebook, which my students have, and just highlight different sentences or different transition words or whatever and make them certain colors. And this was a really cool way to make sure that they actually included everything in their essays. Then they started this biography project, but it was a little bit different. They did a biography on somebody in our class. So they got to interview them and like look at pictures of them and kind of look at like primary source documents, like their diary entries. Everybody had to write like a journal entry. I brought my own diary from 6th grade in, which is a hot mess. I was a terrible little 6th grader. I'm so glad I'm not in 6th grade anymore. I would never go back. but I read them some passages from my diary and then they would like make inferences from it. It was really funny. They paid very close attention to that. In our Read 180 class, we were also working on making inferences, which they did a really good job with. I remember they were pretty confused at the beginning, but then they got really good at it as we went along. This was more about our biography project. We also did a lesson on Shakespeare's sonnet number 18, and this lesson was from E.B. Camps on Teachers Pay Teachers. I had met her actually at a TPT meetup and she gave me this great lesson to do, and I did it on a day when I had an observation and my principal was very impressed. I think that she thought I made the curriculum, but I tried to explain to her that it was like Teachers Pay Teachers, but she doesn't really know what that is, so I think she just thought that I made it, but I guess I'll go ahead and let her think that. So that lasted a few days. That was pretty fun. My Read 180 class did something kind of similar, and then they were also looking at point of view. Oh, I remember that was a fun lesson from Vocabulary. They have a really cool video about point of view. So after we did a biography on students in our class, then we moved on to like a famous person. And they had to choose somebody from the Newsella website, and Newsella partnered with biography.com, and they have a list of tons of people that you could choose from. So we used random name picker to find out like who got to choose people first, and we worked on that for quite a while. My Read 180 class was working on these reading journals that I got also from Teachers Pay Teachers that were amazing. I've actually done a YouTube video reviewing them, so you can check back for that. We analyzed images of like the person that we were doing our biographies on. I thought that was kind of a cool, like mixed with history type of skill to look at. I decided to just have them do slides. It was on Google Slides rather than like write a paper on that person. When it was March, we also started women's history packets, and we did like a bell ringer every day on women's history. This is when I discovered that we had a subscription to Brain Pop. No one ever told me that. I was like, oh, we have Brain Pop in this district? Okay, so I started using that quite a bit. And then I also wrote down some notes for the biography project for next year, and like how many sources are reasonable and like what the section should be and stuff. So anyway, then going into March, I wanted to start our Farewell to Manzanar unit. We also did those women's history bell ringers, and just for myself, I knew I was gonna have to do softball tryouts. It was gonna be open house, and we had this thing called Science Day. So this ended up being a pretty busy month. We continued to work on our bibliographies. We did more productivity bursts because they liked those. We started Farewell to Manzanar, and I have a really old video about a Farewell to Manzanar curriculum set that I got on Teachers Pay Teachers that I've used for a long time. So that's one of my older videos, but it's still exactly how I teach it. I love that curriculum. Again, we're using more Brain Pop and the Read 180 curriculum. I'm kind of an expert in the Harlem Renaissance. That's like what I wrote my master's thesis on in history, and so I took kind of the Harlem Renaissance unit and expanded it a little bit. And a song that you can find on YouTube, it's from Fantasia 2000, Rhapsody in Blue, and the character development is amazing with no words. So you can use this in an English learner class, and it is absolutely amazing. This was one of my favorite things that I did this year. Here, the primary source document we were looking at was like the notice for Japanese people to evacuate Los Angeles, and we were looking at the euphemisms within that document, and that was a really powerful lesson. Looks like I kind of like switched things around quite a bit. Science Day was this Friday, and all of the 6th graders got to do like science activities all day long. So I had to do this perplexing powders activity. It was a little bit hard for me since I don't teach science, but we all just like pulled together and did that for our students. It was really fun. Brain Pop has stuff like, you know, learning about like there, and inferencing and just all kinds of really fun stuff. So I love Brain Pop. Oh, I also took all my students, well, like whoever wanted to go, to see Beauty and the Beast the day that it came out. We had a short day this day. Yeah, it was a minimum day, and we did Science Day all day, and then after that we went and saw Beauty and the Beast at the theaters. That was really, really fun. Oh, and that was the day after open house, so I was able to like, you know, answer any questions the parents had that night, and then we just had a super fun day that Friday. It was really cool. Here we continued to work on Farewell to Manzanar, one of my favorite books ever. In Read 180, we were reading this story called Bad Boy, and we made our own comic strips about it. Ugh, I had to start softball, which made my days really, really busy. We also read this story called The Bracelet, which is in a lot of 6th grade literature textbooks, and so we kind of combine that with Farewell to Manzanar. There's a lot of post-its on this page, so clearly I changed a lot as I went throughout the week. Oh, and this day it was the centennial of the US Virgin Islands, so I did this big party and this really crazy long lesson about the Caribbean and the Virgin Islands and Rothschild Francis, who I wrote my master's thesis on, and so this was like just a big party day. That was really fun. Oh, I loved this day too, reading the Langston Hughes poems. Going into April, we started the Odyssey unit. Again, this was a collaboration with the history teachers. We did poetry bell ringers every day for April because that's National Poetry Month, and we continued Farewell to Manzanar. This took a long time to go through. And we have this thing called Greek Day at our school, which is really, really fun. This day was spring break. So here we started looking at Greek myths, and this again was from Hubbard's Cupboard on Teachers Pay Teachers. I love their stuff. They just do great work. At the end of March, we looked back at the women that we had learned about for Women's History Month and talked about women we admired. Oh, this was Greek Day, and so I had like a Olympic obstacle course that I ran, and I was in charge of Team Corinth. We had all of the different history classes separated into city-states, and they all competed against each other, so that was like such a fun day. And with my Read 180 class, some of those kids didn't actually have a history class. They had a study skills class instead, so I made sure to really catch all of them up on some of the Greek myths just to make sure that everybody like knew what was going on by the time they got to Friday. So sometimes with the kids in this class I had to be aware of things like that, just to make sure that everyone was included in everything. Here we continued with Farewell to Manzanar. We did a little bit of like, we wrote some haikus that always turned out really violent for some reason. They were trying to write the most violent haikus that they could. Oh, we also watched this movie Go for Broke, which is so good. It was made in like the 50s. It's in black and white. It's hilarious. It's from the perspective of Japanese men who were interned, but then volunteered for the army and went and fought in World War II. And it is incredible. It's amazing that it's a true story. I really can't believe it's a true story. For this class, we actually did skits to kind of like test their knowledge of the Greek myths, and that was like the best way to do it. They had a lot of energy, and that was just a really fun way to like check for understanding, and they enjoyed it a lot. This story is also really good. Thank You Ma'am by Langston Hughes. It's a really good one for middle school. Oh, this is the day when I ruin their childhoods and I show them Dr. Seuss propaganda against Japanese people. Oh man, that was crazy. And then this day, I swapped classes with one of the US history teachers, and I taught her 8th grade classes for the day, and she taught my 6th grade classes for the day. Her father-in-law, I think, was also interned, and so she had a lot of family history to share with my students about Japanese internment, and so I wanted them to have her perspective. So she came into my class and did that, which was so special, and then I got to teach her 8th grade history classes, which I love doing, and I had just missed it, and so she was like, here, you can teach my class for a day if it'll make you feel better, and it really did. We did get into the history of the atomic bomb. We did some figurative language stuff. With Read 180, we were kind of doing our own separate thing. We were doing a lot of stations and getting ready for testing. I did more test prep with them than I did with my other students, really. Oh, here I was just like jotting down things for my classroom design for this year. In May, I guess I didn't write down anything there because it was mostly testing. All of those days we did testing. Here, I don't even know, I think we were just finishing up Manzanar. Oh, and we did like listening practice because that's something that they have on the SBAC test that we just never practice in class. And then they usually score pretty low on it. And it's like, well, we never actually did that. So we listened to this Tumble podcast, and then they each made cahoots about whichever one they listened to, and then somebody else would listen to that same podcast and try and take their kahoot. So that was a really fun way to do test prep. I did some practice performance tasks with my Read 180 class because those performance tasks are just quite intense, and so I wanted to just show them like what they needed to be prepared for. And we also did the Tumble podcast lesson as well. During testing, I had them take the 16 personalities quiz on 16personalities.com, and we did a whole unit about finding our strengths. Oh, and we got audited during testing, so we had to be like super perfect with all of our procedures. And then for my Read 180 class that week, I had them watch this documentary called I Am 11. I love it. It just really celebrates 11-year-olds and like their minds and their creativity. And like at this point in the year, a lot of the kids in that Read 180 class were really not being celebrated by anyone. A lot of teachers were frustrated with them, so I just wanted to do something positive for them. Then during the next week of testing, I thought this was so fun. We watched Zootopia, and then we did a whole unit on stereotypes using Zootopia as like a mentor text, and that ended up being really cool. I also did that with my Read 180 class, and they really enjoyed it. And at the end of the year, there's this like counselor type person that works at our school, and she's really into like capability, like students in middle school becoming capable of like multi-step tasks. So we started making a brochure about their capabilities. I think I was out for a training and had a couple of like just random days of like little mini lessons here. My Read 180 class was also doing their capable brochure and then working on like subject verb agreement. Oh, and this lemon brown story, I remember that was a cool story we found on commonlit.org. These were our brochures. They wrote book reviews, which I'm going to share with my students for next year. I saved those. Oh, and then I love iCivics, and they had come out with this new game called Counties Work, and so I had my students be like video game testers and try that out for me because I might want to use it for my history classes this year actually. And we did some really similar things in Read 180. Getting into June, I was like, whatever, this is just the end of the school year. There's not much left to do. I think this was like the last week of school. We just kind of did some reflections. We cleaned my room. They were great at cleaning my room. We had an awards assembly. Oh, and then I set up lip sync battles for the last day of school, which was like the most fun activity ever. It just turned into like a huge dance party. It was so much fun. Like, I didn't know my kids were so cool until the last day of school. That was really fun. And then there were even more pages in this planner, like all the way through July. So I actually did teach summer school. I taught journalism and business. And so I just like wrote out my lessons, like not as in depth for summer school, but I just jotted down a few things. So I really love this planner because it just had so much in it. And this is kind of where I stopped writing. Okay, I'll talk to you with my hands. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was helpful to you. I know it was long, but I hope this can be a good resource for you. So have a great year next year, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.